Man, everyone is turning on Stranger Things now that it's over, now that people have been underwhelmed by the finale, or what we think is a finale. It depends. There's a conspiracy theory that the Duffers are actually going to pull a coherent ending to the story out of their butts tomorrow, but I don't see that happening. But we're going to talk about a bunch of publications calling out Stranger Things and the Duffers for not getting their D&D lore right. They're actually going by 5e rules, I think, for a lot of the things referenced in Stranger Things. It's weird to see this because Stranger Things was built kind of around Dungeons and Dragons, right? Now, this was an accident because if you recall, there was an interview with the Duffers a couple of months ago where they said that D&D was not supposed to be as central to the plot of Stranger Things as it wound up being. But there it is. So you would think, again, this being a multi-million-dollar Netflix show, that they would maybe bring a few grognards in to say, hey, this happened in 1983. This didn't happen in 1983 or 1987. And I caught a couple of them, and I just kind of hand-waved it. But, man, we got some old-school gamers that are really not happy with the mistakes. They're like, you should do better. I mean, I was catching mistakes with the toys, like they had an Ultra Magnus in 1985, and the video games aren't right. Ghosts and Goblins. Recently in this season, that was the one that stuck out to me the most. Was they were playing Derek, dipshit Derek was playing the arcade version of Ghosts and Goblins on his NES, and I'm like, damn, that is one fancy super duper NES you've got there, dipshit Derek. How the hell did you pull that off? Not possible in 1987, but we're going to look at some of these mistakes and why they probably happened. Again, D&D was kind of window dressing for this show, right? But if you're going to make it that pivotal to the plot of the show, that all of your villains are named after old school D&D villains, you'd think you'd pay a little more attention to detail. Just saying. So before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. So I don't know where to start here. There's a laundry list. The big one was, of course, Will. They kept referring to Will as a sorcerer, and wargamer.com even calls that out. They said Stranger Things 5 was a tough watch for hardcore D&D fans. Season 5 had plenty of good and bad, but all I could focus on was how it got 80s Dungeons and Dragons very, very wrong. That wasn't because of the many, many scenes where a plan was devised using a prop-assisted, strangely out-of-breath classroom demonstration. No, it was the show's D&D references that had me squirming in my seat. That's because while I appeared to be sitting silently on the sofa, somewhere deep inside my inner nerd was screaming. The temptation to interrupt and actually the show on Dungeons and Dragons knowledge was the strongest correcting compulsion I have ever felt. And it's not just D&D, it's pretty much everything with this show. It's kind of the 80s by AI, I guess. It's just, there are a lot of, it feels right until you start looking at it a little closer, and then it becomes very obvious that the Duffers missed the 1980s, right? And that's true. They actually said that they were, Magic players in the 90s. They are about 10 years too late to the Gen X party. So what they're going on, I think, are false memories of the 1980s via VHS tape or DVD. For them, probably DVD, or watching reruns of old sitcoms or something. But there are some things that just are not accurate. And it's not just limited to D&D, but we're talking about D&D. So he said, it was kept in check only by the knowledge that no one I was watching the show with would even care a little bit. Fortunately, I write for a tabletop game website for a living, so here is the opportunity I've been waiting for. Okay. Actually, the Sorcerer D&D class didn't exist in the 80s. Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird too, but, whatever. It wasn't added to the game until the 3rd edition, which came out in 2000. Oh, and also, actually, as Polygon already pointed out, Will isn't a D&D sorcerer. Anyway, he's a warlock. That's right. Just like Holly Wheeler's Under Armour sleeve, that was a big one. The entire sorcerer versus wizard conversation was out of place in Stranger Things 1987 setting. Yes, you were a wizard. If you used magic, wizard, mage, whatever. I think it was more grating for me than for the fashion nerds who spotted the wardrobe whoopsie because the Under Armour wasn't a plot point, whereas the Sorcerer class came up in multiple conversations. It was actually the title of one of the Bleepin' episodes. Right? And frustratingly, the Stranger Things writers got it wrong in more ways than one. Firstly, it was an anachronism. Mike, Dustin, Will, and Lucas would have been totally unable to quibble about the lore differences between a wizard and a sorcerer. That's because the definition of a sorcerer, someone who doesn't learn their spells but has innate magical powers, simply did not exist. Secondly, this is a terrible description of how Will's powers work. Anyway, he wasn't born with them. 11 was. So while I suppose the point is that 11 had to practice her magic and Will just has it, from another perspective, she is more of a sorcerer than he is. Yeah, he was intubated and was able to jack into the hive mind. So he borrowed powers. They said, yeah, the 5e Warlock is a spellcaster who has no natural magic ability, but gains powers thanks to a pact with a more powerful supernatural being. Perhaps some sort of fairy, angel, or demon. That actually would fit better for Vecna. Given that they weren't trying to stay loyal to the 80s version of the game anyway, it seems very odd that the writers didn't pick up on this opportunity. Perhaps the lines had already been recorded and the D&D experts in the room were afraid to speak up. Maybe everyone was worried there was too much SEO competition for the term Will Warlock, or maybe they were just relying on viewers not thinking too hard. I think the target audience for Stranger Things is younger and people that, again, have nostalgia for a decade they did not experience, and they're nostalgic for a version of Dungeons and Dragons that no longer exists. And I've said since the beginning, the version of D&D that Eddie was playing is not the version of D&D that they sell now. And it sounds like they're getting their wires crossed, right? So yeah, they said, this is what's weird though. Can we have a conversation about it, about Stranger Things' rather odd connection to Dungeons and Dragons, which is probably should have been dropped after season 3. It started off as a fun backdrop to children's adventures. The geeky kids used the Demogorgon as a metaphor for the monster. Okay. At this point, it didn't matter at all what D&D monster they used because the characters had so little information about the baddies. It simply meant that it was an unknown threat to them. But as the show went on, the friends started to attach more meaning to the metaphors. Mind Flayer made some sort of sense in season 2, but things got more stretched and strained from there, especially as the characters grew up and seemed less and less likely that they were spending each weekend gaming in the basement. Season 3 dropped the D&D connection, but then 4 brought it back in a big way with Eddie, which meant the main baddie going into season 5 was stuck with the name Vecna. You guys, he has a name. It's Henry. It's hilarious when you take a step back and realize the end boss villain would be completely and utterly confused by his nickname. Yeah. Or the mission briefings are still taking place using D&D language, but now there are 12 people in the room who we have no reason to think have ever touched a die with more than 6 sides. Yeah, that's true. We could go deeper. Wizard technically isn't right either. It was magic user, yes, until 1989. That is true. We previously had Erica describe her rogue instead of the thief it should have been. I'm sure every appearance of D&D lore or gameplay in Stranger Things could be dissected and criticized and found wanting. It would be futile, though, because Stranger Things isn't a show about D&D. It kind of made itself a show about D&D, right? And that's how they're kind of selling it. And I think that's what's so interesting about it is if you're going to sell official Stranger Things D&D merchandise, and they've been doing this for a couple of years now, last couple of seasons, you would think maybe somebody at WotC would, be an advisor on the show and be like, yeah, that's not, that actually wouldn't have happened. But do the people working at WotC now even remember what D&D used to be? Are they trying to distance themselves from it? Are they going with it because they're like, well, we want them to play 5e anyway. Like, we're going to dress it up like first edition AD&D, but it's really 5e that they're playing because that's the current version of Dungeons and Dragons that we sell. So we're going to let this stuff slip through. Very much the critical rolling, I think, of the show, right? Polygon's ripping them apart. They said Mike was a terrible dungeon master. Here's another one. This one's come from PC Gamer. Obsidian's Josh Sawyer leads the charge of RPG fans playfully roasting Stranger Things for its D&D rule flubs. The old heads are going to catch all the things. Yeah, so we have Blake Barton noting the show's characterization of the sorcerer is incorrect. The modern class didn't appear till 2000. A roll of 7 when casting prismatic spray, resulting in the violet version of the spell, is described as causing blindness. Wrong. One commenter, Danny YQ, pointed out the show has referred to thieves as rogues. Yes. And while not the worst thing going down our world of sin and cruelty, I was struck how a show so heavily drawing on D&D for its imagery and plot could keep getting it wrong. I also find it weirdly joyful and life-affirming how, as PC Gamer senior editor Wes Fenlon put it, D&D real heads like Sawyer know this detail and can pull the exact 1980s reference book off the shelf to prove the doubters wrong. Yeah, I don't understand why they didn't hire somebody to go over the details, right? I mean, if you're going to do a period piece, and it's not like this is 1920, you know, everybody's still alive. And apparently they had Winona Ryder kind of, you know, nitpicking stuff here and there. I read that before, but I don't think she played D&D. I don't think she collected Transformers. I don't think she played video games. So you need somebody that's into this nerd shit, considering the nerds are the main characters of the show and like everything revolves around nerd shit. You'd think they get the nerd shit right. I'm just saying. But they said, yeah, it's interesting. The Duffers are 10 years younger than me, and they've admitted they're more Magic players than D&D players. You know, the D&D experience of the kids on Stranger Things is similar to mine. So they said the experience began with basic and expert sets of D&D. Yes, that was mine as well. Before branching out into advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, the mention of the house rules we're talking about. This is Josh Sawyer. Okay, so yeah. The other thing that makes me look sideways at the errors is that so far in the 5th season, the lines aren't just wrong for 1st edition, but they're correct for 5th edition. Yeah, so that's what, I mean, there might be something more insidious going on here. It might be an oopsie-doopsie, or it might just be, well, when the kids who watch the show go to the store and buy the Stranger Things D&D campaign set, they're gonna recognize all this terminology from the show because it's 5th edition, right? I don't know, just a thought that crossed my mind. I mean, it's just like Critical Role, you know, they make sure that they're playing 5th edition because they got to pimp 5th edition. They said, yeah, it's not a capital offense or anything, but it is very interesting that, again, a show that's all about D&D or has become all about D&D is getting a lot of basic stuff wrong. But they've gotten so much other stuff wrong on this show. It's more, like I said, it's more like vibe coding. I think I mentioned that in the series finale review we did. It feels more like vibe coding. Like they're not really going for accuracy. They're going for a feeling. They're not really going for a plot that works. They're going for a feeling. It's not the actual 1980s. It's what they think the 1980s were like based on feelings and DVDs. Their brothers' DVDs or older brothers' DVDs. So, yeah, again, here we go. Baldur's Gate 3 directly inspired the final battle for Stranger Things Season 5 in 1987, reveals director. So he says, the most popular Dungeons & Dragons video game ever made, Stranger Things directors, the Duffer Brothers, revealed in an interview with Variety that Baldur's Gate 3 was a major part of the show's big final battle. We were thinking about D&D, and I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 at the time, and we felt it was very important that the only way for them to defeat the giant spider kaiju was for the entire party to work together. Yeah, it lasted like 6 minutes. Everyone had fully realized, either through self-acceptance or they've resolved all their various issues moving into the final battle, they're absolutely primed. Well, luck of the dice, right? I mean, what if you what if you freaking suck? What if you die? That'd be funny. They're the ultimate team. They're the party working together. And that's where I go back to Dungeons and Dragons and Baldur's Gate, because that's how you take down these monsters that seem otherwise unstoppable. Unless you roll a 1, and then you're fucking dead. Forever. You're dead forever. That's the way we used to play. You're dead forever. So yeah, it is really interesting that people are calling this out now. And I don't know. I just, look, it's a lost cause at this point, but it would have been nice just all the way around to have somebody on set that said, yeah, this didn't exist then, that didn't exist then, there's no way in hell. how did dipshit Derek an arcade cabinet in his bedroom? Do you know how? I think it was like Hang On or something. I'm like, do you have any idea how much that cost in 1980s money? Like, his parents were pretty well off, but I don't know if they were that well off. But I digress. It's over, I think. Gonna wrap it up. Please subscribe. We'll talk later.